The fit and proper person test. In footballing terms, the fit and proper person test is supposed to be like a pre-season medical, not for the squad, but for the owners. A check to make sure the people buying and running football clubs aren't crooks, aren't bankrupt, and aren't going to run the club like it's a casino. It's meant to protect clubs from bad actors. The idea being, if you pass the test, you're a safe pair of hands. But if recent years have shown us anything, is that this test has more holes than a Sunday league net. Take Morecambe, for example. A club of loyal fans, a proud identity, and yet they've been pushed to the brink. Players unpaid, ownership in limbo, and a sense that no one at the top really cares. Then there's Sheffield Wednesday, where fan protests have been almost as regular as home fixtures, with supporters locked in a constant battle against an owner who seems more committed to stubbornness than sustainability. These owners seem to have the long-term vision of a snap general election and the people skills of Priti Patel at an immigration centre. And then, a little closer to me, there's Harrow Borough. I used to go there every week. It's a proper local club with real history. But even there, something just doesn't feel right. There's no ambition, no clear plan. The boardroom feels like a social club for the same 6 guys who've been running things since the 80s. Which is charming until you realise the club feels like it's fallen into debt and new fans are treated like an inconvenience. It's like the whole thing is being run as a hobby, not a football club. Now, I've covered this issue before. Russian and Diamonds, Chester, Portsmouth, all clubs with proud histories undone, or nearly undone, by disastrous ownership. But here's the thing. The problem isn't just the individuals, it's the system that keeps letting them in. So, in this video, we're going to dissect the so-called fit and proper person test. We'll look at where it came from, what it was supposed to do, and, more importantly, why it's doing such a bad job of protecting football clubs from being treated like toys, businesses, or vanity projects. Because when the wrong people are handed the reins of a club, it's not just the finances that suffer, it's the community, the culture, and in many ways, the future of that club altogether. There are as many clear examples of good, honest owners within the footballing world who want to achieve greatness, within the means of not running a football club to the ground. But why are there people with bad intentions not only acquiring these football clubs, but are still running them? Let's find out. So, to start off, let's talk about how the test was created and, more importantly, why it was ever needed in the first place. In the mid-1980s, football governance began slipping away from local community control. According to the independent Manchester United Supporters Association, the FA abandoned Rule 34, a regulation that prevented club owners from profiting disproportionately from their club ownership. Specifically, dividends on shares were capped and directors could not derive their primary income from clubs. This rule has acted as a brake against clubs becoming personal cash cows. Once this protection was removed, private ownership and exploitation became easier. A few years later in 1992, English football underwent a seismic shift. The top clubs broke away to form the Premier League. Driven by commercial ambition and lucrative TV deals, this move shifted power toward wealthy individuals and corporations. Suddenly, club ownership became big business, not just by passion, but profit. As broadcast revenue soared, club valuations skyrocketed, opening the door to speculative investment and an increasing tendency to run clubs like personal enterprises, often without accountability. The first public voice calling for a football ownership vetting process was Sir John Smith, the former Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, in 1997. He proposed a formal test to assess the suitability of shareholders, arguing that football needed safeguards to prevent financially careless or unscrupulous individuals from gaining control of clubs. The FA dismissed the idea at the time, opting against regulations that would constrain new owners. 2 years later, in 1999, the Labour government formed the Football Task Force, chaired by David Miller. After public consultations, the task force recommended structural reforms, including greater fan engagement and scrutiny of club ownership. The draft commercialisation report reportedly advocated for an independent regulator and fan representation on boards. While these recommendations were included, they were largely ignored by the football authorities, limiting their impact. In 2003, football governance came under further scrutiny when the Independent Football Commission, a regulatory body overseeing the FA, Premier League and Football League, called for proper corporate and financial governance across the sport. Their repeated reports stressed stronger accountability for owners and directors, recognising clubs as cultural assets needing regulation beyond mere legality. Simultaneously, at a national level, corporate governance scandals like N1 and WorldCom had prompted the Higgs Review in 2003, which advocated more rigorous standards for boards and non-executive directors. Though focused on listed companies, its principles spurred awareness around corporate oversight across sectors, including football. Despite these repeated warnings, meaningful action didn't arrive until 2005. After Roman Abramovich's high-value Chelsea takeover heightened awareness around unchecked financial power in the game. Only then did the Football League introduce a formal fit and proper person test for prospective owners and directors, focusing on criminal convictions, football bans, or bankruptcy. The Premier League followed suit shortly after, but critics quickly noted a glaring weakness. The test was a basic checklist, not a rigorous evaluation. It asked if someone had done something wrong, not whether they were qualified or capable. There was no due diligence on long-term funding, football incompetence, or ethical intent. It was a pass/fail gate that, once opened, rarely led to further scrutiny. In practice, this meant any person who legally passed the test, however lightly vetted, could take full control of a club. There was no requirements for ongoing accountability, fan consultation, or long-term stewardship plans. Clubs became vulnerable to exploitation by absentee, reckless, or vanity-driven owners, despite earlier warnings and expert recommendations from figures like Sir John Smith and the Football Task Force. In essence, the system was born after decades of warnings, only to deliver a solution that addressed minimal criteria and delayed implementation under large-scale financial disruption, made inaction impossible. What came afterward protected the game from legal issues, but not from owners who had no intention to protect their club's future. First, let's break it down exactly how someone can fail the fit and proper person test. If you're buying or running a club, earning 30% or more, or acting as the director, you're expected to be a person of integrity. You'll be automatically disqualified if you meet any of the following conditions: a criminal conviction of fraud or dishonesty anywhere in the world, declared bankrupt or subject to bankruptcy restrictions, lawfully prohibited from acting as director of any UK registered company, being a director of a club that entered insolvency more than once, banned by a sports regulator, either football authorities or equivalent regulatory bodies, found to have breached FA rules governing betting activity, or registered as a sex offender. These aren't vague criteria. They're clearly spelled out in the league and the FA regulations, intended to filter serious red flags before someone takes over a club. Yet, over time, several high-profile individuals have still managed to slip through or disastrously fail outright. In November 2009, Stephen Vaughan became the first football club owner ever disqualified under the fit and proper rules. He owned Chester City and had also been a director at rugby league side Widnes Vikings. In 2007, he orchestrated a £500,000 VAT carousel fraud. claiming refunds via offshore accounts. As a result, he was disqualified as a company director until 2020. The FA acted swiftly. Vaughan had to reduce his shareholding at Chester City to below 30%, or face expulsion from the conference within 21 days of his disqualification, taking effect on November 25th. Chester never recovered the financial damage and ultimately folded in 2010. Vaughan had become the first owner explicitly found unfit to control a club under these regulations. Then, in March 2012, saw another catastrophic failure. Craig White had purchased Rangers Football Club in May 2011, pledging his own funds and responsibility toward clearing the club's debts. It later emerged he had been disqualified as a company director from 2000 to 2007, a fact he failed to declare. Worse, he funded the takeover by mortgaging future season ticket income, rather than investing personal resources. An independent inquiry by Lord Nemo Smith concluded that White was not fit or proper to run Rangers. Consequently, the club plunged into administration in early 2012 and liquidation later that year. In September 2014, White received a 15-year ban from acting as a company director, effectively deterring him from any official role until at least 2029. His failure triggered widespread criticism of the system's inability to flag previous disqualified individuals before takeover. Additionally, not all failures emerged from shady criminals or financial misconduct. In 2014, One Direction star Louis Tomlinson, partnering with businessman John Ryan, attempted to buy Doncaster Rovers. Their plan relied on raising £2 million through crowdfunding, but only managed over £750,000. Because they lacked both sufficient funds and a credible business plan, the FL's test administrators ruled they didn't meet the financial criteria to pass. Their bid collapsed and the takeover was blocked, not for misconduct, but for inadequate proof of sustainability. But perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is this: the fit and proper person test doesn't just fall short by accident. It might be designed to be limited. The very bodies that enforce it, the Premier League and the EFL, are themselves economically incentivized to welcome new investment. In a financial system where broadcast rights, sponsorship deals, and club valuations drive the heartbeat of football, blocking a wealthy owner, even a questionable one, can feel like turning down a golden ticket. Loopholes aren't always oversights. Sometimes they're the right price of keeping the money flowing. So, while the test filters out the obviously unfit, it often waves through those who might still pose a long-term threat to the soul of a club, just so the game can keep cashing checks. At the core, the Premier League and EFL were never set up to govern football. They were built to make it profitable. As Sean Hamill from Birkbeck University said at a parliamentary inquiry, the league's job is to run two successful business competitions, not safeguard social responsibility or enforce ethical stewardship. The fit and proper, their supposed watchdog, is evaluated only on legality, not morals or communal accountability. What emerges is a system perfect for ticking boxes, but utterly toothless when it comes to protecting clubs or fans from bad stewardship. In June 2011, Russian investor Vladimir Antonov, whose bank had been banned from operating in the UK for failing to provide essential documentation, was still cleared to take over Portsmouth. Within 5 months, his parent company, Converse Sports Initiatives, collapsed, and Portsmouth were in administration, suffering points deductions and relegation. The Football League defended the takeover, claiming due process had been observed, despite the very real fraud convictions and financial misconduct on Antonov's record. He resigned in November 2011. Portsmouth entered administration by February 2012, despite supposedly passing the test. Then, in June 2007, just after being ousted by a military coup in Thailand amid serious allegations of corruption and human rights violations, Thaksin Shinawatra was allowed to buy Manchester City. Despite Human Rights Watch warning of extrajudicial executions and abuse under his rule, the Premier League deemed him fit because he had no criminal conviction. Richard Scudamore defended the decision, saying the coup was not from an elected government, and only convictions matter under the rules. Less than a year later, Thaksin was convicted of corruption in Thailand and sold City to the Abu Dhabi United Group for a £20 million profit. Even former FA chairman Lord Treesman criticised the decision during a parliamentary inquiry, arguing that the system failed to account for credible but unprosecuted global allegations. While not formally disqualified, the takeover of Liverpool by Tom Hicks and George Gillette in 2007 exposes another dimension of the test's failings: leveraged debt. Hicks and Gillette purchased the club via a leveraged buyout, enormous debt transferred to Liverpool's books, crippling the club's finances. Scudamore claimed at the time that such a situation would not lead to administration, as there were always potential buyers, a reassurance later proven false. Witnesses suggest there was evidence that Liverpool risked spiralling due to the debt load, and yet, under the test's narrow criteria, the takeover passed, showing the governing body's limited power and unwillingness to block such risky deals. On a lighter but telling note, Andy Holt, chairman of Accrington Stanley, has repeatedly used blunt analogies on social media to highlight the absurd state of lower league finances, describing it as stupid that clubs scrape by on pennies while rich buyers are given a free pass. On the Totally Football League show, he lambasted the system that allows owners to pass the test despite raising warning signs that have nothing to do with convictions or bankruptcy, but everything to do with sustainability and fan impact. It's a sign that the very men who run clubs feel the system is absurdly inadequate when it comes to real-world oversight. Antonov had a history of banking bans and financial misconduct, yet passed the test. Thaksin had credible global allegations, but because the test demands convictions, he passed too. Hicks and Gillette loaded the club with debt, yet there's no financial stress criteria in the test that would stop leverage buyouts. And executives like Andy Holt argue that moral duty, long-term planning, and fan rights aren't in any test at all. Each example demonstrates what fits the rules, but still damages clubs beyond repair. The governing bodies are incentivized to promote investment, often at the expense of scrutiny. They see broadcast deals, sponsorship money, and rising valuations as signs of health. Blocking a takeover, even a dangerous one, might be bad business optics. Loopholes aren't just accidental, they're sometimes tolerated to keep money flowing, which leaves clubs vulnerable to owners who can pass legally, but still fail morally, financially, or sustainably. A system built to prevent obvious wrongdoing, but not poor stewardship. A test that filters out criminal baggage, but ignores moral baggage. The fit and proper person test was never designed to guarantee the right outcome for clubs. It was only designed to avoid the wrong outcome for the leagues. And, as these cases prove, those failures aren't mistakes. They are system design flaws. Imagine owning a home that's infested with cockroaches. Most people, quite sensibly, would call in pest control. Professionals who deal with infestations and protect the integrity of the house. But in English football, the house is the English football pyramid, and the Premier League, the supposed homeowner, has taken a very different approach. Faced with obvious warning signs, they don't fumigate. They just open the door and invite in more cockroaches, in the hope that one of them turns out to be alright. It's a backwards logic, where terrible owners are treated not as threats to be removed, but as part of the furniture, tolerated, sometimes welcomed because they might bring in cash. The governing bodies aren't asking, is this person good for the club? They're asking, can we get away with letting this one in? And this is the core flaw of the fit and proper person test. It isn't built to protect fans, traditions, or communities. It's designed to minimise scandal and maximise revenue. If the paperwork checks out, the money flows, no matter who signs the checks or what happens after. Out of 100 football clubs, even if 99 were protected by good, honest shareholders, owners and directors who want the best for the club and its community, that 1 out of 100 who has ill intent in asset stripping a club and driving it into becoming defunct, the fit and proper person test, at least in my eyes, would still be a flawed test, as it should not be an exception to allow at least one football club be run through the mill at the expense of the governing bodies earning more cash. The result? A game where clubs with over a century of history are handed to reckless investors like unwanted raffle prizes, where fans are forced to protest just to keep their clubs alive, and where, time again, we hear the same hollow reassurances from the very institutions meant to safeguard the sport. Until the test is more than just a checkbox exercise, until it includes ethical standards, financial sustainability, and accountability, the system will keep inviting disaster through the front door, dressed in expensive suits with no care for what they leave behind. As I'm writing this conclusion, there are claims of Morecambe being officially shut down today, and Sheffield Wednesday players have voiced their concerns and worries in relation to their futures and being paid. For me, it astonishes me not only how these great, massive historic clubs can be left in this much disarray, but also how these owners have not been held accountable for their neglect and forced to leave their duties as proper people owning an English football club. It should be the most minimal requirement for those who want to own football clubs to set a precedent of caring for one of the most important parts of a local community. Even now, in 2025, this phenomena of incompetent owners is trickling down into non-league, such as Farsley FC. However, I feel it's only right to raise awareness about a club close to me before anything potentially damaging happens down the line. As I mentioned at the start of this video, my local side, Harrow Borough, appears, from the outside, to be in a somewhat precarious position. I've been following them since the mid-2010s, and in that time, I've noticed things that don't sit quite right. There have reportedly been multiple offers from other clubs to ground share at Ellesmead, offers that, from what I've heard, have been turned down. Some supporters have even been painted as scapegoats for the club's recent relegation, despite recent achievements like reaching the FA Cup first round against the likes of Northampton and Portsmouth. That injection of prize money seems to have dried up, with little sign of long-term planning or ambition to build on it. From the outside looking in, it can sometimes feel as though the club is being run more as a private social hub than a competitive football team. A place for a small group of individuals to gather, rather than a community asset with goals, ambition, or inclusivity at its core. Of course, there's nothing wrong with building social bonds through football. In fact, that's part of the magic of the sport. But when it comes at the cost of progress, community, and transparency, it's difficult not to feel uneasy. I truly hope Harrow Borough doesn't go the way of clubs like divisional Farsley FC, who fell into financial ruin and disappeared. I don't claim to have all the answers, and I'm not here to make accusations. But from the things I've seen and heard over the years, I can't help but worry. And I hope, by speaking about it now, people might start paying attention before it's too late. So thank you very much if you've made it this far in the video. I really do hope you enjoyed this little video that I've made. I know I've learned a lot about it, especially about the ins and outs of the fit and proper person test. If you enjoy this kind of content, please make sure you subscribe. And as always, I will see you soon.